Georgia Tech with a stunner. And DJ Uiagalelei, yeah, he's got to bear some of this blame.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How about them Yellow Jackets? Welcome, everybody, to a reaction episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. That's Brian Smith, Locked On Seminoles. Thanks for making this your first listen or your first view post Georgia Tech, 10.5-point underdog, pulling the upset in Ireland. This episode brought to you by our friends at Ultimate College Football HC. Brand new mobile game that's completely free, has no ads, 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. We'll talk about Georgia Tech later in today's show. Are they legit in the ACC? And a news story in college football we're going to discuss. But let's start with the big game, Brian. I watched this game, and DJ Uiagalelei is dinking and dunking the ball and can't complete a pass down the field, except for the one drive where they went down to tie the game. You put some of this blame, certainly on Mike Norvell. The lines of scrimmage were dominated by Georgia Tech, to be sure. But I said going into the year, Florida State cannot win a national championship with DJ U at quarterback. We saw why today.
I don't disagree with the national title thing. I completely disagree on DJ being the main issue. I knew from fall camp and talking to people over the summer, they had issues at receiver. They knew going in they weren't throwing it down the field a ton. They expected Georgia Tech to take a lot of chances, and they did. They had to. The few times they played like man on that drive where DJ threw the money balls, man coverage, they don't have the corners to do it. So they blitzed. DJ's not the most mobile guy in the world. He's okay in the pocket, but their offensive line stunk. That's the part nobody saw coming. Just complete bust. Byers at right tackle in the first half. That was
not good. Not good.
He's a guard playing tackle at the college. He has a chance to play pro football at right guard. He will never sniff tackle again, based on what I saw in the first half. By the way, shout out Romello Height.
I was about to say his name.
Holy moly. He had 4 sacks last year for Southern Cal. So he's a good player, but he just made some money.
Ball player.
Yeah, he's going to be like an ACC second team guy or something. You could see it a mile away. He destroyed Florida State today. Once that happened, they don't have somebody else for Byers. They put him in. They don't have somebody. And I think once they saw that, they're like, except for going max protect, they threw a couple deep balls they didn't connect on. They didn't have faith in their offensive line. I don't think there's a fix for this. So the problem, unfortunately, isn't that I'm necessarily right over you on this. They don't have a fix. They have a major problem on the right side, and he has a ton of experience. This is one of the most experienced offensive lines in all of college football. He
might have just had a bad day against a good football player, but regardless,
that was his problem last year too.
They're gonna when you play Miami's defensive line,
they're in trouble.
You better not play like that. You better not play like that. Now, I will offer a silver lining or an olive branch to Florida State fans here. The season is not over in the 12-team playoff. There just have to be changes. You have to find a more reliable passing game, and you've got to fix the offensive line. And holy smokes, Brian, they've got to fix the defensive line.
That was bizarre.
I did not expect Florida State's defensive line to be as good as last year when it had guys like Jared Verse who went off to the NFL. But they reloaded in the transfer portal as well as anybody in college football. And they got absolutely dog walked. That Georgia Tech offensive line fundamentally won this football game. Get this, Brian. You want a Josh Pate style padlock stat? 190 to 98. That was the rushing yards disparity from Georgia Tech to Florida State in this ball game.
That's the mild one. I've got 2 far worse.
Hit me.
Haynes King only threw 16 passes and they won. That's number 1. Number 2, top of your head without looking, how many tackles for loss and sacks did the Noles have?
1. They had 1.
They had 3 by the stat that I'm looking at. Depends on which
one. But one of them was a fumbled snap.
Exactly. They could not get penetration much. Lundy had the one early in the third quarter, shot the gap, tremendous play, and then there was like one other that was legit. Georgia Tech was better up front. We knew they were going to have a pretty good offensive line, but Florida State has NFL players up front. So this tells me 2 things. And one, I saw coming a mile away. I don't care if you threaten to beat them. You are not going to get a team up for Georgia Tech, first game of the year after an undefeated season. That's not – I know Florida State fans don't want to hear it, and I get it. This happens every year. When a team comes off a mid-level season, and it's been a while since Tech's been good, let's be honest, you're not going to get 100% out of your players. That was a problem. And number two, something you and I talked about briefly on one of your shows a month or two ago, Florida State expects to make the playoff. I think based on how poorly they tackled and how lack of physical they were, I don't think they hit that much in fall camp to the ground and stuff like that. And it showed. Georgia Tech did more than Florida State did. I guarantee you based on what we just watched.
Yeah, I mean, the trenches were really dominated on both sides by Georgia Tech. And I don't think Georgia Tech's offensive line and pass protection was incredible. I thought that's where Florida State, showed that defensive line muscle that we saw. And Haynes King just made some really plays. But boy, Brent Key, former offensive lineman. Again, we're going to get to the Jackets more later in the show. Brent Key as an offensive lineman had to be grinning ear to ear. In fact, he was. He said, run the ball after the game, gave Haynes King a big old hug. How about the kicker coming through with a 44-yard? How about Florida State's kicker? Just as a couple notes there. Kicking college
yards, bro.
Oh, man. Oh, those were some kicks. Those were some stones.
He's going to get paid.
Oh, yeah, those were some big-time kicks, but it wasn't enough. End of the day, you and I both predicted the exact same score coming into this game, and we both thought Georgia Tech would keep it close in the first half, but that FSU would pull away in the second half, but they had no offense. They had no passing game, which is why I go back to DJ U and why I had the take I did on him over the summer. Even though I liked FSU's offseason, and they brought in a really good transfer portal class, that veteran Georgia Tech offensive line leaned into those newcomers, and it looked, as you said, Brian, like they just weren't hitting because they were not ready. From the jump, the very first play that Georgia Tech ran, I mean, they washed down the offensive line, and I could have run through that whole, now not for as many yards, of course, because I'm incredibly slow. I'd probably have a 5.8 time. But I just was so taken aback by, wow, this is the Florida State program? I know it's not the exact same team, but this is the program that just won the ACC, that just wanted to be in the 14 playoff and whatnot. And I think if you're a Florida State fan, you're taking it on the chin today. The season's not over, but there are so many things that have to be corrected. The passing game, the defensive line not getting moved around in the run game, those would be the two biggest things I think Florida State has got to fix. But this is a pretty disastrous start for Mike Norvell and company.
There is no walking it back. And Mike's a good guy. I think that's pretty obvious based on everything I've been told and how he presents himself. There's no nice way for him to go into this press conference.
No.
He cannot do the following and it be congruent. Be honest and keep his team. Because if he's honest, every one of his players up front are going to hate him. They sucked. There were 2 or 3 plays in the first 3 or 4 drives where guys didn't come in to make a play or hit deep. They didn't get touched until beyond, what are you doing? This offensive line has a gazillion miles of experience. This is a player problem. I know fans really hate hearing that because you can't fix that real quick. There is no shortcut. And a lot of them are seniors, 5th-year seniors. We got a player problem. How do you have all these guys come back, have worked together, going against a unit that you are better than, even though what we saw, and just have mental errors? Forget physicality. When guys go scot-free, they can suck. They're going to screw up the passing game or the running game. You want a really bad stat? One of the things that I track in games that I'm really interested, number one thing on my stat sheet, what do you do on first down runs? What do you think, Spencer, Florida State was in the second half on first down runs? This is pathetic.
They had to be under 3 yards a carry.
They had a total of 5 carries on first downs. They had to throw it a little more in the second half. That's fine. 5 yards, 2 yards, 1 yard, 3 yards, loss of 3. So they had 8 yards on 5 carries, 1.6 yards per tote. That is pathetic.
That's bad.